April 30th, 1945. Dachau, Germany. The rain had quit, but the mud still clung to American boots as if the ground itself did not want anyone leaving yet. Men from the 42nd Infantry Division stood inside the camp gate, frozen around a freight train that had arrived full of bodies and stayed there like a warning. Arms hung through broken slats. Faces were gray with rot. Flies covered mouths that would never speak again. Private Daniel Mercer tried to look away, but the camp gave him nowhere to rest his eyes. Then a shout cut across the silence. A German guard was on his knees. Another was bleeding into the gravel. And dozens more SS men were being marched toward a wall by Americans who had just seen too much. Sergeant Joe Rizzi heard rifle bolts snap forward. "Mercer," he said quietly, "don't move." Nobody asked for orders. That was the problem. Lieutenant Frank Delaney came running from the rail siding, his face gray beneath the dirt. "Who's in charge here?" he shouted. No one answered. Men were breathing hard. Rifles were up. A machine gun team had already set itself behind a pile of broken brick. The SS prisoners stood in a line with their hands raised, black uniforms streaked with mud, skull insignia still visible. One whispered a prayer. Another kept saying in rough English, "We surrender. We surrender." Corporal Nate Boudreau spat into the mud. "Tell that to the train." A medic named Walter Keene stepped from beside an ambulance, gloves stained dark. "Lieutenant," he said, almost pleading, "you need to stop this." Delaney looked at the freight cars, then at the prisoners, then at his own men. For one long second, he said nothing. Then he snapped back into command. "Hold your fire." Near the wall, Staff Sergeant Leonard Wilkes, a veteran from Sicily with a scar under one eye, kept staring at the nearest SS guard as if deciding whether the man belonged to the war or to hell. "Sir," Wilkes said, "you didn't see what they did in those barracks." "I said hold your fire." Prisoners were emerging from deeper inside the camp now, walking skeletons in striped uniforms. A Polish priest made the sign of the cross. A teenage inmate pointed at the SS and screamed in Czech. A woman in a torn coat covered her mouth and cried. One older officer with silver at his temples tried to stand straighter. "We followed regulations," he said. Rizzi took a step forward. "Say that again." "Sergeant," Delaney barked. Rizzi stopped, but only because Mercer caught his sleeve. From the watchtower, an American yelled that more guards had been found hiding near the kennels. News kept arriving in pieces. Beatings, executions, starvation, disease, children's shoes. Captain Howard Ellis arrived 10 minutes later in a jeep splashed with wet earth. He took one look at the prisoners, one look at Delaney, and understood the line had already been crossed somewhere no one could measure. "What happened?" Ellis asked. Delaney answered carefully. "The camp was secured. The SS were disarmed. Then some of our men saw the train." Ellis glanced at the machine gun. "And now I'm trying to prevent a massacre." Ellis faced Wilkes. "Who ordered this lineup?" Wilkes met his eyes. "No one, sir." That was worse. A single gunshot cracked from the far side of the yard. Everybody flinched. Not here, Delaney realized. Somewhere else. Another pocket of rage. Ellis walked to the SS line until he was almost chest to chest with the older officer. "Do you know what this place is?" he asked. The German said nothing. Ellis pointed toward the train. "Because my men know now." The officer's jaw tightened. "War is harsh." Wilkes lifted his rifle again. Ellis did not shout. "Lower it." Wilkes did not move. "Sergeant," Ellis said, quieter now. "If you do this, you won't be doing it for the dead. You'll be doing it because you want the noise in your head to stop." For a moment the yard was silent except for coughing behind the wire. Then one of the SS guards broke. Rankin ran. He made it 3 steps. The machine gun burst cut him down. Dust jumped from the brick. Mercer ducked. When he looked up again, the German was face down in the mud, one hand still twitching. And now the silence was gone. Rifles erupted. Men who had held together through artillery, ambushes, and frozen nights suddenly fired like the war had reached inside them and ripped out the last restraint. SS guards dropped against the wall and into the gravel. Some screamed. Some never had time. Delaney yelled to cease fire. Ellis yelled too. The shooting went on for several seconds that felt like a lifetime. Then it stopped. Smoke drifted through the yard. Mercer heard spent casings settle in the mud. 45 SS guards lay broken at the base of the wall. Keene the medic knelt beside one of the fallen Germans, checked for a pulse, then stood without a word. Ellis removed his helmet and wiped rainwater from the brim, though the rain had ended long before. "Get the wounded treated," he said. "All of them. Ours. The prisoners. Anyone still breathing. And the guards?" Mercer asked before he could stop himself. Ellis looked at him. His eyes were red. "I said anyone." The language changed as it moved upward. Confusion became incident. Incident became unauthorized shooting. But language could not clean the yard. Colonel Edward Linden arrived after dark and turned the administrative building into a temporary courtroom. A translator named Anna Weiss sat at a desk with a notebook, hands trembling as she copied statements from survivors and soldiers alike. Linden listened to Delaney first, then Ellis, then Wilkes. No answer satisfied him. Finally, he stood by the window and stared toward the floodlit wall. "How many?" he asked. Anna looked down at the page. 45 confirmed, Colonel. Linden exhaled slowly. "I will report it exactly." Wilkes leaned forward in his chair. "Then report the train exactly too, sir." Linden looked at him. "I intend to." Near midnight, a convoy approached the camp. Boots hit gravel outside. Doors opened. A hush moved through the building. General George S. Patton entered without hurry. Mud marked the lower edge of his trousers. His ivory-handled pistols rested untouched at his hips. He removed his gloves, set them on the table, and looked around the room with steady, unreadable eyes. "Colonel," he said. Linden handed him the report. Patton read it standing up. No one heard anything but paper moving beneath his fingers and distant coughing from outside. When he finished, he placed the pages on the table and looked first at Delaney, then Ellis, then Wilkes. "Take me to the wall," he said. They walked out under the floodlamps. The bodies had been covered with ponchos, but boots and sleeves still showed. Beyond them, survivors watched from the shadows, hollow-eyed and silent. One little girl stood barefoot beside Anna Weiss, holding a tin cup. He climbed onto the nearest step, peered inside, and stayed there longer than anyone expected. When he came down, his face had not changed. Back in the yard, he stood with his hands behind his back. "Who fired first?" he asked. No one answered. Patton let the silence hold. Then Wilkes stepped forward. "Sir, I opened fire after one of them ran. But all of us were already there. All of us knew why." Patton studied him. "And did you have orders to kill surrendered prisoners?" "No, sir." Patton nodded once. "I know what those men were. I know what this place is." His voice stayed calm. "That does not change what a surrendered prisoner is under our authority." Patton looked toward the survivors behind the wire. "If the United States Army starts shooting prisoners because rage feels righteous, then discipline dies the moment it becomes inconvenient." He turned back to the officers. "And the day discipline dies, we become another army in another uniform." The words hit harder than shouting could have. The general continued. "There will be an investigation. Honest statements. No polished lies. No heroics added afterward. The dead in those rail cars do not need inventions. They need truth." "Yes, sir," Linden said. Patton took one more slow look at the wall. "As for this camp, the townspeople will come here tomorrow. They will see it. They will bury the dead. They will not tell themselves they knew nothing." Patton then looked at the barefoot girl with the cup. He walked over, crouched slightly, and asked Anna to translate. "Where is your family?" The girl answered in a whisper. Anna hesitated. "She says she is the only one left." Patton was silent for a moment. Then he removed a ration bar from his pocket and placed it carefully in her hand. "See that she eats," he said. "Yes, sir." When he straightened, his expression hardened again. "Mercy is not weakness," he said quietly, more to the soldiers than to the child. "It is the one thing these bastards spent years trying to kill. Do not hand them victory after they are already beaten." Before leaving, Patton spoke once more to Linden. "Write it all. The camp, the train, the shooting, every filthy detail. Someday men will try to doubt this happened. Make sure the record survives them." At dawn, the civilians came under guard. They saw the barracks. They saw the ovens. They saw the train. And beside the wall, they saw what hatred had made of everyone it touched. Mercer watched them carry stretchers with shaking arms. He watched Wilkes stand alone near the gate, helmet in hand, saying nothing. He watched survivors take their first careful steps into open ground, too weak to celebrate, too emptied out for anything but breathing. The dead SS guards were not innocent. The Americans were still not monsters. But for one terrible burst of gunfire, justice and vengeance had stood inches apart, and exhausted men had crossed the distance without hearing themselves do it. That was Patton's lesson at Dachau. Not that evil should be spared, but that evil should never be allowed to choose what kind of men defeated it. Years later, those who were there would remember the smell first, then the wall, then the silence in Patton's voice when he reminded them that victory meant more than surviving the battle. It meant surviving without surrendering the part of yourself the war was trying to burn away. Because once that part is gone, no metal brings it back. What would you have done? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more World War II stories where humanity, war, and difficult decisions collided, make sure to subscribe.